Okay, responding to Mystery Maverick series on Darlie Routier, I'm responding to how she maximizes and places labels and puts assumptions on things while describing what she feels is the innocence of this woman convicted of capital murder in Texas in 1996 for the death of her two sons. Beja Jovel was Darlie and Darren's co-worker at Colplex, and together she did help Darren start Tesnique, which is a computer board programming they put together. Beja would also do little odd jobs around the house and work for them, and Beja's mother Helena worked for Darlie for a couple days. Beja was a bridesmaid at Darlie's wedding. I had the pleasure of doing two 1 hour long interviews with Beja here on YouTube. After it was 20 years after the crime, she refused to speak about the crime. But she spoke to me. She even turned down an interview with David Chase, who did True Blood and American Beauty. She wanted to speak to me. She had been watching some of the things that I was doing, she had said. So I got a hold of her, and she gave me these two interviews in which she described that she loved Darlie and she loved those boys. But Mystery Maverick refers to Beja as Darlie's arch nemesis. I want you to hear it real quick.
On another interview for a recent documentary, The Last Defense, Darlie's friend Julie Clark said, "All the kids just wanted to come there. Darlie would have popsicles and goodies for them. She was just a real fun-loving, caring person." Even Darlie's arch nemesis Basha would later say under oath that Darlie loved children. She was kind to them all and encouraged the boys to have their friends over to the house. She further states that the boys were smart, well cared for, and well-adjusted, happy kids.
Beja did state that. She stated that to me as well, that up until the point of a couple of weeks before these murders, that Darlie was a good mother. And that she loved having kids around and stuff like that. But who would be a bad mother in front of their friends? What I want to understand, I don't understand why Mystery Maverick refers to Beja as her arch nemesis. I think I know one reason. It's because Beja did testify for the prosecution. She didn't say everything that she knew, though. And I asked her during the interview why she's saying things in this interview that she didn't say then. And she said she answered the questions that were asked her. She didn't want to volunteer any information. So if they would have asked her stuff. But this is how Mystery Maverick tries to manipulate the situation. This was somebody that worked for them. She didn't have any problems with Darlie until after the murders. She had no issues. They never fought. They were friends. But she refers to her now as her arch nemesis because Beja testified against her. And I'll state this again. This is something that a lot of people that have been around the case who saw the interview that I had up of Beja, which is not available now. Beja told me, and she told everybody, I got 100,000 views on this video. She said that the day of the murders, that they had been fighting for about a week. They had been fighting. And she said the day of the murders, June 5th, 1996, she came over to the house around dinner time, and Darlie was in there making dinner. She was literally sharpening her knives because she was cutting up chicken for the chicken noodle. And she said that her and Darren began to argue in the kitchen, so she slipped outside to the back, out I believe she said she went out the sliding glass doors there behind the couch. And she said Damon was outside. And that Damon was outside playing with a stick. And she said, hey, Damon, what's up? And Damon asked her, can I spend the night with you tonight? And Beja was in the process of telling, well, I have to work. You know, what's wrong? And blah, blah, blah. And he said, because Mommy's being mean to me. And about that time, Darlie came to the door and broke that conversation up. Now, Beja did not become Darlie's arch nemesis. She didn't become somebody that was mentally ill. She didn't become all these things that people say on the supporter side until after she did the interviews with me. Up until that time, they didn't speak about Beja. After Beja did the interviews with me, people found her on Facebook that supported Darlie and chased her off where she will not speak on the case at all. But Mr. Maverick calls her arch nemesis. Why? Why would you call her that? Because you keep giving us statements of people you say that knew Darlie, as if these statements were 100% true. Well, Beja also knew Darlie and Devin and Damon. And she made some statements too that you guys didn't like. But you're putting up Julie Clark and Melanie Waits' statements. Look, somebody said something good. That knew them. That knew Devin and Damon. Well, there's Beja that knew Devin and Damon. That knew Darlie. That was saying things that weren't so flattering. That makes her an arch nemesis, doesn't it? There's some things that I can tell you about that Julie Clark. You know, but I'm not going to slander her if that's what she feels. But you can't put up the good things that people say as if it's a fact, and then be mad when somebody that also knows Darlie and Darren and was in that house says something bad. But let's look at what an arch nemesis is. Now, just by a quick Google search, it shows that an arch nemesis is a chief enemy. She described her as Darlie's chief enemy. When did Beja become Darlie's chief enemy? Were there any problems between them before these murders? No. Beja became Darlie's chief enemy only when she became a witness for the state. Other than that, they were doing cocaine together, according to Beja. They were friendly. They worked together. They went from one company to another together. Darren would even take Beja back and forth to work sometimes. But when did she become her chief enemy? Why wasn't it before the murders that Beja was the chief enemy? Because she wasn't a chief enemy at the graveside when you see her holding up Drake's hands. She wasn't her chief enemy then. Why would her chief enemy be at the memorial for her two slain children? Why would she invite her chief enemy? I would like for Mystery Maverick to explain why Beja is now Darlie's arch nemesis. I'm going to call you out when you try to maximize things just because she testified against her and held back at that. That makes her a chief enemy? Can't have things both ways, Mr. Maverick.